Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Well. You all know me, Pastor Ramon or Pastor Ray from the Well, and this is
Jojo. Hey everyone. Hey everyone.
and this is the Well Encounter. So, over the last couple of weeks and this month, it's been tedious. It's been vexing, to say the least. The senseless murders of Black people. It's been a thing for 100 some years, 400 some years, has escalated. And we are at a place where we are seeing crazy backlash from that. And we're also seeing a lot of support. But we are at a place where the anger has risen, where tension has risen. And that is being felt all throughout the country. And it's being shown by marches. It is being seen in protests. It is being seen by rioting. It's been seen by looting. And we want to start having more conversation about the conversation that needs to be had here in the country and throughout the world about systematic oppression. It should upset you.
And just how to have the conversation. If you're upset, how do you start this dialogue with someone that does not look like you? To actually walk through that conversation the proper way,
Right.
Instead of cursing and yelling and getting upset about something, because this is such a sensitive subject. Go ahead.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to be joined by a panel of a few of our family and friends, squad members here at the Well for tonight's encounter. So I want to take the time and ask you to like this post, share this post with other groups that are looking about ways to have the conversation, that are pissed off, that are toiling with the idea of Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Share this to different people. Share this to different groups. And we're going to have a really big conversation. So we're going to bring our panel in. I want to just introduce briefly those people, and then we're going to go into a wonderful artistic expression from our creative arts director, Kim B. And we'll also do a prayer, and then we'll have a really healthy conversation. And so, hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey.
So we've got Luis Carabantes with us tonight, this evening. We've got Anna Josie and Matt, who are also part of the squad. And you guys, how are you all doing tonight?
We're doing all right. Living that quarantine life.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely quarantine life. Listen, we're going to have a really good conversation, an intense conversation tonight. Are you guys ready to have the conversation?
Ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to break real quick, and we're going to go to a beautiful presentation. Our director of arts, who is Kim B. Miller, is the person who is in charge of the artistry that we do, the creative arts component of the Well. She wanted to share a special poem with you guys tonight. As we do that, remember to share this, like this to your other groups, to your other friends. Send it to somebody's messenger so that if you think they really would benefit from this conversation. And we're going to come back and have more conversation. Special shout out to Amplify Network, who is hosting this for us tonight. Jackie, you can take us away to the poem from Kimby.
What does an atrocity look like? Well, I can tell you what it smells like. It smells like the air we breathe because we see it so often. We would give you our definition, but you would just rewrite it and script it and call it your scripture. That's happened to us before. Remember we took a knee and you said it was all about the flag? We're used to our purposes getting re-scriptured to fit your description. I really need to ask our Native American brothers and sisters. You see, they've been carrying the torch a lot longer than we have. They got the burn marks to prove it. It was the land of the free and the home of the brave way before you landed on their shores. Then you came aboard and had them made reservations on their reservation. And what about us? Told us we were nothing but slaves, slated our history so it suit you, rewrote our past so we were limited. We don't drink that Kool-Aid anymore, and you don't get to write our story in that watermelon ink. We will write our truths. And the truth right now is we want freedom. We are not asking you to be our best friend. We are asking for freedom. Isn't this the land of the free? in the home of the brave. So what's the problem? Or is freedom only for a few? The hunt is on, and we are sick of being the hunted. People of color have been hunted for the simplest of things, like breathing, like thinking, like disagreeing. We don't want to fight. We want to live. Where are you going to fall on the side of history? Are you going to pause at this point and make your point? Or you're going to make the point for freedom? When your point loses its point, why are you still pointing? It's time for it to be about right. Stop hunting. Stop hunting. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, let me help you. If you've never been hunted, you don't understand what it's like to feel like prey. Prey on that.
Woo!
Wow.
Come on, Kim.
Wow.
Come on, Kim.
Wow.
She said, if you don't know what it's like to be prey on that.
Stay on that.
That's
Wow.
deep. That's good. That's good. That's good. So let's go ahead into a word of prayer. Kim already set us up. Let's go ahead into it. Father God, we come right now, God, just to say thank you. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this hour. We thank you for this time of that we're in. God, we ask right now as we go into this conversation that you lead, that you abide, that people's ears and eyes and hearts will be open to receive a different perspective, that this will be a challenging conversation, God. There will be some friction, but we'll be able to iron it out, God, through reasoning and through your wisdom that you will give us. God, we ask that right now as people are watching and liking and sharing this post, that the right person that needs to see this will see this, God, and that people will share this to people who need to understand and need to know how to have the conversation. This is a special time. This is a touchy time. This is a sensitive time, God. And we ask right now, God, that you lead us through this in any way and in any shape, form, or fashion that you would have us to go, God. God, lead us and we shall follow, God. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So let's just do a quick introduction of who we have on the panel with us. Listen, I want everybody to know this is the Unchurched Church, and that just means that we believe that church does not have to be consolidated to just the four walls of a building. We don't believe that church has to happen in just the more traditional manner. We believe that when two or three are gathered and we can talk through the issues of the day, we can talk about them in loving, committed way, and we can talk about them in a spiritual way, that we're having church. We definitely want to edify and praise God, and we want to do that by holding up to his commandments and holding up to his truths, and truth will set you free. Does everybody agree? Can I get an amen?
Amen. Amen. Yeah, we got to stop.
Listen, okay?
We gotta stop.
What we got the bring?
We the Unchurched Church. You can't be saying amen after everything.
That's true.
Still be a little.
Listen, why don't we take a quick second? Matt, why don't you tell people who you are, your name, and just what you do? Anna Josie, why don't you do the same? And you can do that after them. Go ahead. Jackie, you can take it.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name's Matt. I'm really glad to be with you all tonight. For a day job, I work at American University. I am a professor there, or adjunct professor there, and at the moment, my office is working on basically an assessment of court policies and practices that cause or unwittingly cause racial disparities in how folks progress through the system. So I definitely bring a data-driven white person perspective to this conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Chelsea. So Matt is my partner, my husband, and we live here in D.C., obviously. We've been here 6 years for you, 5 years for me. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm Venezuelan. I am the founder of an organization called En Conjunto, and what I do, it's a collective that's working to bring together independent practitioners that, organizers, artists, healers, anyone who's doing work at the intersection of justice and spirituality that are folks of color and are looking to serve their communities and their people, but need an umbrella of support to do that under. Myself, I'm also obviously an independent practitioner, and the work that I do is with churches, schools, organizations, anyone who's trying to work towards liberation and decolonization, justice and equity work. That's what I'm about, and I love to partner with people that want to see that happen. And I love being a part of making that a reality for them. So that is me. And also, Ana Josie is actually one word.
Yeah. And then, Louise, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and just who you are to the squad currently.
Yeah, so my name is Luis Caravantes. I am originally from El Salvador, and I help with the Well Squad when it comes to finances. So that's my area of expertise. That's actually where I work at as well. I currently work at a law firm doing accounting. I don't know what else I'm supposed to share. So.
You might need a little lighting on you. Do you have any lighting?
Yeah, Louise, if you have a little more lighting in your area, I don't know if you do. I know. Listen, guys, we of course doing the. And listen, let me say this. Let me just give a quick disposition. So we are trying out this new equipment. Thanks again, and technology. Thanks again to the Amplify Network. And so you'll see a couple of things that might be a little flawed and skewed as we go forth. We ask you to bear with us. At all churches, all entities are kind of learning how to move forward. And so even with Louise, I know that he actually just moved into a place today as well, and so there's some color thing going on. But bear with us; we're still going to have a conversation.
He's just a darker skinned brother right now. That's all.
and you all see Anna Josie's name at the bottom. Anna Josie's name is actually Anayelsi, one word. So if you guys look her up, it's just the one word. So Anna Josie, we apologize for having you on. Let's dive in a little bit. So, Matt, you are originally from Europe, and do you want to clarify what part of Europe?
If you couldn't tell, I'm from Britain.
So my first question goes to you, and tonight I just want to give everybody an overview. We're going to really move through just learning a little bit more about us personally, kind of how we're dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement. And you guys have seen a lot of the people posting about all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. Does every cop get judged the same way? Are all cops bad? Where do we find Jesus in this conversation? And a lot of other conversations. Where do other races, do they stand with us in terms of Black Lives Matter? And so we're going to dive into all of that tonight, and then we're going to really get into how do we begin to have the conversation around our country and around the world that moves us to a place of progression. And so, Matt, traveling here from Europe and residing now in the USA, what do you find has been the most unsettling aspect as you've learned more about our ancestral history?
I think one of the most interesting things about coming to America and seeing what, we're taught about America, the British perspective on America is always interesting, but generally European education focuses on America as like the land of the free, as this haven of safety for people to go and, start a new life. And I think coming over here and seeing that was only true for a very, very small subset of people. The slave trade is sort of the obvious piece of that like America was not only built on slavery, but coming over here and realizing that there's this thing called the Three-Fifths Compromise that is written into the founding document of this country. A line below, this country is about equality and justice for all. Like there's such a weird tension there. But then also like, we're taught about this sort of westward expansion of America and these white people coming into what we're sort of socialized into was empty land, right? There were maybe one or two people living there, and then realizing that like, oh, actually, this land belonged to other people. This land wasn't empty and ripe for people to just live in. This land was, in polite company colonized, but in truth, it was stolen on the back of genocide from these people. And I think we don't learn that about the history of America. I know that that's not particularly common in American history here, but I think coming over here and seeing this land that was built on these ideals was probably the most jarring thing for me coming over here.
Yeah. I can only imagine that. And so as you wrestle with that, what are the complexities you now teach? You've come over, you've settled a little bit, and now you sort of you're teaching over at American University, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so would you say that the majority of your class is white, or what are the racial components of your class?
The last class I taught was 30 people, and I think 24 were white. Two or three were black, and 2 or 3 were probably South American. Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, certainly teaching in a school in DC, where the white folks try to be as liberal as possible, often to our own detriment. Sort of, how can we outwoke the last person that just spoke? But I think even in that context, it's really interesting to see. I'm loath to call it a white savior mindset, because I think for the students it's naivety. I think for the staff and the faculty, we should know better, and perhaps we don't. But there's this sort of desire to swoop in and fix all of these problems, and a lot of the students are looking for very concrete ways to kind of dive in and deal with all these issues and save this broken, corrupt, racist justice system from itself. But I don't think we're willing. Particularly as white folks, we don't do well at sitting, we don't do well with mourning, we don't do well with reflecting, we don't do well with discomfort, frankly. So we sort of see this one thing, and we see half of the American prison population is black, and 13% of the general population is black. We need to fix that, let's go. And we never stop and say, why? How did this happen? And then we don't stop and say, and who else is doing this? If you asked every white criminologist in any university across the country who's heard of Angela Davis, 10% would probably say yes. And she's been doing this work for 30, 40 years. And a lot of the ideas that she's putting forward are things that are now coming to the forefront, things we're now talking about. And white folks are like, let's start doing this. And there's this... there's a bunch of black female scholars who have been saying this stuff for 30, 40, 50 years, and we're running over them. And so I think one of the challenges as a professor, and I think I'm definitely still learning how to do this, is showing particularly white students these issues and exposing them to these issues that they probably aren't aware of. White students are far more likely to know a police officer than they are to know someone who's been incarcerated. So we come to the system with our own set of biases. But to show them what's happening already, and to point them to, this is how you learn from the people in the movement, this is how you learn from the black scholars that are doing the work, rather than assuming that we studied this yesterday and now today we're going to start our own organization that deals with this issue. And often, because we've got a platform, or we've got money, or we've got something that poorer black folks don't always have, we often get the platform just because we've got a loud voice. And the reality is that squashes a lot of hard work of a lot of people that have been doing this work for a long time. So I think the big tension, to try and summarize your question, is how do we do this work without erasing voices of people who have been doing the work for a long time? And how do we not dominate the conversation? Just even in sheer strength of numbers, there's more of us. So how do we not dominate that conversation? And how do we make space for black scholarship, for brown scholarship, for people to come in and take center stage?
white people are the majority, and you do have all these liberals, especially in the DC, who are like who are like woke, and they might be almost hotel to a certain extent because they are so woke, and then they take on a
Hmm.
battle that I don't think that they're actually equipped to fight. Like
Oh,
so how do
Yes.
you like how do you just jump and defend when you don't even really you just have book knowledge. You've never experienced it. You
Hmm.
don't have history. None of your family has told you of things that happen. So you're just like, you know what? I gotta take over this problem. I'm gonna fix it for them.
Hmm.
But you
You
are
barely
part
have
of the
book knowledge. You
problem.
got street
But
knowledge.
yeah.
look, and you're part of the problem because you're trying to fix something that you don't even know why it broke.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Um, Let me pause and just say, if you're watching and you're with us, feel free to jump in the conversation. Those of you who are at home, we're interactive, so we'll read some of the comments, we'll read some of the questions. Don't feel that we just have to go off our script. We definitely welcome you to participate. And if you hear something that sticks out, definitely let us know how that resonated with you.
Let's jump to Luis,
Uh,
and then we come back to anything else.
okay. Let me give a little bit of data real quick.
Okay.
I want to say this, and thanks, Matt, who shared a good bit of data with us.
Can you just talk and stop
You know what?
telling Phil
I
fill
was gonna
it
go
in?
with the data, but then you said it. My question was gonna go to Matt. So
No.
let's go to
This is
Luis.
your church. Just how to do it.
Someone
So I'm gonna
moderate the
go to Luis.
moderators.
Moderate the moderator. So I'm gonna go to Luis. So Luis, the question we have, I'm gonna frame it a little different. I'm gonna just put it in a little different context. Being though we've been friends for over 10 years, and the majority of your friend base is African American, am I correct?
Yeah.
I remember some years back when the BLM movement started. You were like, "I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't. They don't really have like I believe you were like, they don't have like a specific direction they're going in. It seemed like they're just trying to grab any cause to fight for. Now that why didn't you understand it then, and what has changed from your initial thought?
Um, so to share part of my story, one of the things that I've encountered in the United States is being an immigrant and facing this very interesting immigration system. So at the time, I know that I was still in the same predicament that I'm in now. That my status here is determined by a system that has not been fixed for the past couple of years. And so when I first heard it, I'll be very honest. My first thought was like, okay, so does that mean that my life as an immigrant is it any less because you're saying Black Lives Matter? And I was on the defense. I was a little like confused. I was not angry, but I was just like, what is the meaning behind it? So it wasn't until like literally recently when I seen a picture, and it was so funny that it was literally a cartoon picture that helped make me understand better. There was a picture of a person that was like, my leg is broken, and so this other person is saying, oh, what about my leg? And then this is like, so for me that there was like a moment of like clarity. It was like,
That was that
no,
aha
it's
moment.
not that Black lives are more important or that their scars or their struggles or their tribulations are more important than mine. Is that on the forefront that the press system is targeting them, and Black
Mm,
Lives Matter, the movement, it not only helps with Black lives, but it also helps with me. It also helps me
mm,
understand that if a people group can, if people in general in the United States can come together and improve the lives of Black people, and I can only imagine what we can do to help everyone, not just Black lives, and not just um, focusing on the selfishness that I kind of had when I first thought about it. Like I thought it was just about um, Black people making it about themselves, and to be real and to be realistic on my perspective of it.
Louise, so that's interesting because so you were one of those people that did not totally understand the Black Lives Matter movement and you kind of come to it, I wonder, do you see that, or what are some of the things? I know that you have a majority of Black friends, but you do have a lot of family, and you do go to every now and then the church with the community of the Hispanic and Latino. What what um what do you see in your community in terms of how they look at the Black Lives Matter movement? Like, what are some of the things you hear from the Latino community?
To be honest, there's an underlying level of racism that is very out there. Is their perspective based off my experiences and my interaction with my people? I'm not voicing everyone's experience. Their
Look, be specific.
judgment and their views and perspective is often looked at as almost the same, similar to white people. They look at Black people with this almost scared mentality. Like, they don't want to approach them. They know they're good people, but based off news or past experiences or bad experiences with one particular person, it just amplifies this sense of fear and sense of like, okay, let me just step away. Let me not delve into it. Let me not learn about a whole different culture that can help you not only understand what it is to be and struggle in America, but also struggle with your own culture's bias.
So, Elsie, you do this type of work. I mean, you're in the field. You are, before this whole moment, this whole season of COVID-19, and before George Floyd, and before Ahmaud Arbery, and before Breonna Taylor, you were already doing this type of work. You were already trying to teach people what it meant to have equality and to move systematic oppression from our lives. Why do you feel the need to do your line of work?
We're dying. It's literally, we're dying. I mean, it's, and I don't mean to say that in like a hyperbolic, like, oh, this is life or death, but we are literally dying. I mean, the fact that we all can sit here, we could fill this entire time right now with no other conversation than just to name the folks that have died in the last year alone from police violence. And that's brown folks, Black folks, that's our Asian folks, that's our Native Indigenous folks. You know, the fact that you so easily could have just rattled those names off, Ramon. You know, the fact that I know that Sean Monterosa was killed this week, the fact that we know that by the police, the fact that we know Breonna Taylor's the officers that killed her in her home while she was sleeping still haven't been arrested. You know, despite people protesting in the street for 2 weeks. That's why we do this work. That's why I do this work. That's why people were in the streets and are going to continue to be in the streets, because we're dying. It's not hyperbolic. The stats back it up. History backs it up. Movement after movement happens because we're dying.
Yeah.
It's not because we're being, you know, demanding or want things to be cushy. We want to live.
Simple, plain and simple. We just want to live. Like, that's simple. We want to live.
And you are from your background culturally is Venezuelan, and
yes.
So how does the Black Lives Matter movement? Because there, as Louise said, right, there are people in these other places that don't really see it for what it is or do not stand behind it totally. How does the Black Lives Matters movement? How have you found the relation to it? Right? How does that reside with you?
So Louise, I really appreciate what you were saying, because I mean, but Louis is being really honest, and I appreciated it so much. I mean, what he is naming is anti-Blackness, and our people, Latinx people, like we're drunk on some anti-Blackness. And we are drunk on some whiteness. We love ourselves some whiteness, getting as close to whiteness as we can. And some of us are white because I like, not to get into a whole like school lesson, but like Latinx is not a race. We can be all the things. It is an ethnicity. We can be black, we can be brown, we can be white. Just gonna throw that out there. So Black Lives Matter is a Latinx issue because there are Black Latinx people. So this is not an outside issue. This is an issue within our community. These are our family members. These are our cousins and our aunts and our parents and our siblings. And we are anti-Black to our own family members, our own community members. And it's our own community members that are dying, you know? So some of the folks, you know, it's a struggle. I know Matt sent a lot of information, and some of it might get shared tonight, about the statistics between Black lives that have been lost and Latinx, or some of it calls it Hispanic, but that's a whole other conversation, lives that have been lost. But the reality is those stats aren't accurate because it doesn't tell you who within those numbers fall into both categories. Some of those people are both. Those are our people. Some of them are brown, some of them are Black. But there's confusion about like what it means. Like when you see folks out there with the Latinx for Black Lives sign, that's actually really awful. It's erasure. We have so many Black Latinx. What you have out there, what you should hear people saying is Las vidas negras importan, which is that Black Lives Matter, and they're talking about Afro-Latinx people. They're talking about Black Latinx people. And I'm saying that to say we've got to acknowledge that this is not an outside issue. It matters to us because it's within our community. It is our people. And even if it wasn't, it should matter to us. Because anybody dying in our streets, anybody being killed by the state should matter to us. And now I'm getting on a soapbox. I'm going to stop right there, but anyhow, I'm done.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I always hear about is, and I hear this from so many people, that there is in the complexities of the minorities in this country, right? So there's this like, Latin, Hispanic, Spanish people who, are like, well, we don't really get along with Black people because we see them as our subordinates. Black people who are like, well, why is there an issue with they have an issue with Spanish people because, they're coming over, they're taking our jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think sometimes we miss the mark because we're not unified in how we move and how we move together.
And I think that comes from an imagined proximity to whiteness. It's not that you're getting close to them. You're not getting close to them. Sorry, it's just imagined. It's like, hey, if I live in their neighborhoods, they will accept me. No, they won't. If I go to their schools, they will accept me. No, they won't. So it's this imagined proximity. Like, the closer I get to that side, I will be better. No, you won't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because we think we're playing some kind of musical chairs. We think we're playing musical chairs, and all the other folks are gone, and we're the only marginalized community left. That white folks are looking at us and go, "Oh yeah, you can join us." Hell no, because they're gonna boot us too next. We're not. Like, they're not gonna keep us. You're gonna say something.
That is that we have these stark differences in the two people that we're talking to. So you have a Latina ex who's married to a British man, and then you have an El Salvadorian who's engaged to a Black woman. So this is a really good. I love the differences here.
So let's talk a little bit statistically. Let's just share some data with the folks who are watching. So we see that over 3 million out of the suspensions in America, over 3 million of those, over 3 million students have experienced out of school suspension. Of whites, that's 1 in 20. Of Latinos, that's 1 out of every 4. Out of Blacks, that's 1 out of every 6. And out of Blacks with disability, it's 1 out of every 4. And so when I saw this information, what I really thought about was the fact that, so we're talking about, let's think about the public school system. Let's think about the school system that are in minority neighborhoods. And when you say 1 out of 6 Black people, if you take an average classroom size of about 25, right? Or let's say even 30, you're saying that 4 out of 5 of those students experience out of school suspensions, frequently.
And in whites, it's only 1 out of 20. That's basically the whole class.
This whole class, right? And they don't even have a class size of 20. and it's so disproportionate. But then Matt, it was really starting to see that people what people suspended for, like chewing gum, or like biting. I saw one where it says biting a Pop-Tart
in the shape of a gun.
In the shape of a gun.
I be dog.
And so you get out of school suspension for shaping your Pop-Tart. Like, we have a real problem in our public school system throughout the country. And then you talk about the school to prison pipeline, where 70% of school-wide arrests are Black or Latino folks. In Florida, 69% of school arrests are for misdemeanor charges. And so when you're looking at the fact that 70% of the folks who are getting arrested in schools, and I saw the article one time where it was a kindergarten who got arrested for, I think, throwing a tantrum tantrum. Like she gets arrested, cuffed, and taken to jail for throwing a tantrum tantrum. This is crazy stuff that happens throughout. So Matt, what type of systematic changes do you think need to take place to redo this data?
And we have one comment. Hold on, Matt. Because Vanessa said disrespect and insubordination are the #1 infractions, which are all subjective. That is social.
Yeah.
And so cultural.
Yeah.
So cultural. Sorry, my bad.
No. But I mean, there you go. That's a classic example, right?
So cultural, and that follows you into adulthood. I'm sorry, for Black and brown women, I've spent all my life. You so rude. You're so direct. You're confrontational. You're intimidating. That starts from a young age, and I'm still hearing it. I'm 35 years old. I'm sorry. Anyhow, you answer a question with your stats.
No, I think that's. I mean, I think when you talk about what do we need to do to change those numbers, like every system needs to come together. Like when we talk about the school system, an easy way to get school arrest down is to get cops out of schools.
Yes.
Like it is bizarre to me that there are cops that are employed to patrol the corridors of schools. If you go to like the roughest areas of South London in England where there's, and I say gang meaning like actual gangs, like this isn't groups of teenagers, this is like gang territory. We don't have cops in our schools. Like here in DC, like every school's got a school resource officer. And so, I mean, that's one thing that's like, why do we do this? There's a deputy chief who just retired in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. And when he took over, one of his jurisdictions was school resource officers. And he basically went to every principal in Philly and said, if you call us up for a fight in your playground, for a kid being insubordinate, we are not coming. If you tell us there's a kid running around with an AK-47, sure, we'll show up. But if you want us to come and arrest a kid for having a fight, you need to discipline them within your school system. So I think part of it is we've got to stop criminalizing. And this is a whole bigger conversation. Like, we've got to stop criminalizing stuff that's not criminal across the board. But with kids, like, they're being kids. The example you gave of the kindergartners, this taken to this extreme, but it's rationalized, right? They were being violent. They were being dangerous. And, I think to sort of like broaden that question a little bit, we know that we were fed a media diet during the 80s and 90s of Black and brown people being scary. Super Predator described 14-year-old teenage boys. They weren't super predators. At worst, they were trying to steal something from the corner store. We've all stolen stuff from the corner store, and we all turned out okay. And the community turned out okay. They just have one less can of Sprite in their fridge that night. So we've got to get out of this mindset that Black and brown bodies are dangerous.
Yeah.
And, it starts in school. Anna Josie's right. It starts in school, but it carries on, right? If you're told that you're dangerous, then you act in a certain way to try and compensate for that. And then you get into more trouble. And there's some really fascinating data on if you look at kids when they come into court, and a jury gets to ask how old they think this person is. If it's a white kid and they're convicted of a felony, they generally reckon they're about 1 or 2 years older than they actually are. If it's a Black kid, it's 4 or 5 years. So that means they're looking at a 13-year-old kid and thinking this kid is 18 or 19. And that's why, well, that's one of the issues that we have with this dangerousness thing. But we've got to stop assuming that people are dangerous.
Yes.
Like kids, I genuinely believe that there is not a kid in this country that is dangerous in the traditional definition. Like, that may not be universally true, but kids are not dangerous. Kids in school are not dangerous, and we've got to stop treating them like they are.
And so,
Sorry, that was...
You're fine. Great. I was looking at, I don't know if anyone else looks at like the Red Table Talks, but I was looking at the Red Table Talks and Jane Elliott was on there. And she was saying how schools are, they're educational, but they're indoctrination into this way of thinking. When you're not taught your own history, you're slated. When you're described like Annie Elsie said, when you're told in school you're rude, you're loud, you're aggressive, you know, at these formative years, this begins to like embed itself into your mentality and how you move in life. So when you're in school and you're told that like, and like you said, especially with history, we are slated to believe that Black history started at slavery. Let's just be real. You believe Black history started at slavery. You don't get like Egypt and all the advancements in Africa until maybe like college, like take like an African studies course, and then it still might not go as in depth as to what the African American culture or Blacks have contributed to the world. So when you say these things like the school systems are definitely something that we need reform on. And one thing I think I've been holding on to this, Annie Elsie, something that I definitely love that you do is that you not only work for policies and political change, you do spiritual things of that sort as well. Because I think another thing that goes on in our society is that we have demonized our own religious heritage to thinking that if it's not Christian, it's wrong. And that's not how we should look at it. And I love that you do that
So
work.
deeply rooted in colonization.
Can you just give me like 1 minute about that? Like how our religions, our own background religions have been stripped away from us. And we know that through conquering, if you take someone's religion away from them, you can take anything from them.
Yes. Yeah. Ooh. I'm trying to figure out how to make this real short because I can go on that. Yeah, no, I mean, spirituality and religion, I think the reason it's such a powerful thing, it's such a beautiful thing, is that it can be so life-giving, but it's also incredibly dangerous. It is something that it's used to control people. And the reality is, particularly for folks of color, for communities that have experienced colonization, that have been wiped out to certain degrees, religion has played a key role, a central role to that. And that religion very often has been Christianity. And a key part of that has involved demonizing anything that is a cultural part of our spiritual practice as communities of color, as the occult, as the demonic, as of the devil, even when it was so similar to Christian practice, when it involves oil, when it involves ancestral veneration, when it involves the saints, like all of these things that are actually very similar to Christian practice. Healing. Yes. So similar to Christian practice, but still get vilified, because if you can tear people away from their generational ties, their community ties, their ancestral ties, it's much easier to control them. And so that's what was done to us as a people. And then we internalized that narrative and we taught it to our own people. Don't do that. That's evil. That's the devil. You gotta go to Jesus.
So I got a great example. And this is something I always use. Voodoo. Like when you say voodoo in the Black community, it's like, no. Don't you talk about that. There's the devil in that. Don't you dare. You're going to get a voodoo doll, a voodoo priestess. But voodoo was a way for our people, before we got indoctrinated into Christianity, to explain that's all it was. It's like, oh no, it's demonic. No. You don't know it's and the problem I have with people, especially of this day and time, is you deem something demonic but never researched into it to see exactly what it is.
I mean, that's a lot like Buddhism, right? Like a lot of us will paint the Buddhist picture of being this horrible, this horrible thing. But when you really look at Buddhism, there are so many similarities to Christianity, and a lot of it just goes right along with each other, including the aspects of peace, the aspects of what it means to suffer. Like, you know what I mean? And so we've gotten to this place where we go off on tangents without understanding things, or taking the time to research those things before we demonize them. I want to switch a little bit, Matt and Yossi, and even Louise a little bit, because we're not privileged to see Tara on today. But I do want to ask this question, and we'll read some comments as well. Louise, you're dating a black woman.
He's engaged to a black woman.
You're engaged to a black woman. Matt and
right.
Yossi, obviously. What are some of the conversations you've had to have in your own relationships with each other? And what kind of learnings have you all experienced from being in relationships with another race?
So I guess I'll go first. One of my favorite moments that with my relationship with my fiance was the reality I had to give her that even in 2015 when we started dating, people would look at us funny. People would look at us. It's not just like our own families, but even people of color. Even it was amazing because at first she didn't think it was something that we would experience, and so when she started noticing the little side eyes and the little glances or the comments or the energy, the shift in energy and the shift in demeanor that people were giving us, she started to realize, like, even in 2015 and even in the 21st century, people were still having old mentalities, and that's honestly what we're battling tonight. I mean, today, tonight, tomorrow, and the next couple years, is mentalities that are either drawn from generational trauma, colonization, whatever you want to call it. It's just mentalities that honestly don't need to be here no more. But all we can do is pray for it.
You know, when you say mentalities that no longer work, I remember just a reference point before Annie Elsie and Matt started. What did y'all say? It was at one of the wells when he was talking about he had met this girl. I think it was I don't know if it's a real story or it's not. He met this girl and she said they did Thanksgiving dinner and they always cut the front and the back of the turkey off. Right. And he didn't realize why. And she was like, I don't know why, because my mama did it. And the mom was like, I don't know why, because my grandmother did it. And they went to grandma's like, why we do that? She said, because back then I couldn't afford to have a pan big enough to fit the whole turkey. Yeah. So you end up just doing things without knowing why, just because you were taught. They just learned behaviors that my grandmama did it, my mama did it, so I can do it. So if you didn't like black people, if you don't like interracial relationships, I'm not. So go ahead, Annie Elsie. Go ahead, Annie Elsie, and Matt.
I love that example. We've had a lot of serious I don't want to say hard, because I don't think hard is the right word, but we've had a lot of serious conversations recently that I've been actually very grateful for. I will say this: it's not been easy, but I've been I know a number of women of color who are married to white men who are, and I mean, we're still in our first year, but I think it speaks to what the trajectory of our relationship is going to be. I know a number of women of color who are married to white men who are having a very difficult time right now. And I am grieving for them, and also so grateful that I'm not sharing their experience, to be frank. And part of that was because I was real careful, like I said, I didn't test him, but I a little bit tested, and the well was one of those tests. Like showing up at the well and seeing a whole bunch of black and brown folks being like, "Oh, and y'all just hang out with Matt and you're cool with him," and regularly. I was like, okay, one day. And then I brought him to a couple events where all my folks were queer and trans folks, and he was just hugging up folks and hanging out, and they loved him. And I was like, okay, you're all cool with him? Okay, check. Because I needed to know that he was walking the walk, because you hear some white people, they put on a good act, and then behind closed doors you realize when it gets hard, when life really asks something of them, they're not going to have your back. and I can't, especially not the work I do. I do it on the clock all day. I can't come home and have to do the work. And so I preface it with that, but now we're in this season where it gets hard. And so it's being put to the test about whether or not like we made the right choice in partners. And so some of the hard conversations, like we had one.
That's really good. That's really good. I love that. I do the work all day. I don't want to come home and have to do the work.
No.
I think that.
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to be on the clock.
Drop your mic real quick, Andy. Just drop it.
Literally, it's the end of the day.
Because if you're thinking that's real, I don't want to be fighting for everyone else and have to come home and fight for my own husband to understand who I am and what I stand for.
Yeah. No.
And I think that's
so like, yeah. Oh, you froze. No. Uh-oh. You froze for you too, Luis?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh no. Well, why don't you go tell your story whilst they're frozen?
I'm worried he's going to jump right back in. I want to hear what he's going to ask. Well, what I was going to say, I'll say what I was going to say and he can come back in a second. I hope. But what I was going to say is, like, this may not work for everybody, and I think you would agree, but if I'm speaking out of turn, like, we'll see if we're on the same page. But I honestly feel like a lot of, at least along the racial questions, like, I feel like I lead and you follow, like, you know? And I think it honestly has to be that way in order for me as a woman of color to feel safe and comfortable and okay in a marriage to a white man.
Yeah.
Especially with the racial tone in this country right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's been interesting, you know, in this context this week. One of my best friends back home in Britain is a police officer. And the sort of the movement, I mean, frankly, the movement to get rid of the police that's growing here has carried over to Britain. And I could talk for an hour about why those two movements don't necessarily have a lot in common and, you know, why policing in Britain is different and all those other things. But ultimately what happened was my good friend who's a police officer basically posted on Facebook a long rant about, like, everyone getting upset with the police and why it's ridiculous and irrational. And I just, you know, commented, like, you know, I think you do a good job. And that led to a really interesting conversation because one of the things that Anna Jelsey was terrified of was like, well, when push comes to shove, are you going to side with me? Are you going to are you going to sit with me and fight for us? Or are you going to run back to that safe little white place that you live in? Yeah. And so I think we did have a long conversation about it. And I think, again, like the differences between British and American policing are such that I think that was kind of where we were able to come to a conclusion. But that fear is real. Yeah. Like you work hard enough and fight hard enough all day that you do not want to look around and be like, well, shit, is my partner with me? Or,
I mean, I was crying when I asked that question. And it was so healing. There they are. Yeah, I mean, I was crying when I asked that question. Like, can I trust that you're going to have my back if a friend or, God forbid, a family member forces you to choose, says something so egregiously racist that you are put in a position where you have to choose your wife, who's a woman of color. And it was so important to me when Matt said, I'm going to choose you. Like, I had to hear the words. I needed to hear them. And to have him say that was huge for me. That was a few days ago.
Yeah. That was
I needed that.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, you know, last night, you know, when Ramon and I talked about the panel and just kind of getting clarity on where we're going with this, one of the things that I was just like stuck on was what's next? What is next? Like, outside of the conversation, what is next? What do you guys think? Like, for me, honestly, I didn't know a particular answer. Like, but how do we move from here in a positive way? I guess that's the question I'm asking.
That is so funny, Luis, because that's literally what I was about to say. It's like we're having this great dialogue. We understand the problem, and I really think your guys' cases are the best. Like you have a Latina ex with a European man, not an American man, but he's the original white man. He's the original white man. He's the original.
I mean, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it.
What they say on Game of Thrones, first of its kind. Do you hear me? And then you got Luis, that just recently got engaged to a African American woman, and then you being a immigrant, a minority yourself, having to deal with your own feelings about what's going on now, and still having to support your wife and making sure that she, or your future wife, and making sure that she feels that, like Annie Elsie just said, you have my back. So how do you? Because we've had a lot of great conversation. How do we move forward, or what are you guys' advice on how to have the conversation moving forward with friends, family, especially just like Annie Elsie said, like if you had to choose your family over me, what would you do? Because I've seen people put in those places. I mean, even where there's been monetary awards, like if you leave her, I'll give you this much, this, that, third. Or they would have came to Annie Elsie and said, hey, if you stop messing with him, blah, blah, blah. And Luis, it's the same with immigrants and, El Salvadorian and African Americans, So, like, what would be you guys' advice to the people who are watching on how to have the conversation?
And can I be even more direct? Louise, let me start with you. Is a person who did not understand the term Black Lives Matter, who really wanted to embrace the All Lives Matter slogan, what's the conversation that
no, I didn't say all that.
Okay. I love it. So this is a person who was cautious around the Black Lives Matter term.
I'm sorry, that took me out. Like, I got
wait. Hell no. How would you move forward in helping others to understand the term Black Lives Matter, especially as a Latino young male?
And you're about to have a mixed race baby. Putting all your business out there. I'm sorry. So how do you support all of that?
So the reason why I had to ask the question was because for me, I found my answer in the way I would approach it, right? But it's, with life, it's many ways to live it. It's just you finding your own way. So to answer your question, it's being honest with yourself, truly with yourself first. Because if you're not honest with yourself, you can't be honest with no one else. I had to come to the realization that I did have biases as a person of color, not only towards my own people, but towards other people of color, and towards white people, and towards everybody. And so when I was becoming honest, I realized I had to take ownership of that. So it's up to me to change the mentality. It's up to me to change my mentality, not no one else's. I can hope and pray for you, or whatever aspect of prayer, whether you're faith-driven or not. You have to choose whether or not you want to change how you feel and be receptive to those opportunities to be vulnerable to others. Because I think change is not created by opportunities to go back to old behaviors. It's created by opportunities to change and create new opportunities. If you get what I'm saying, like.
So
you give yourself an opportunity, like even as like I'm gonna say this, and you take it as how you want. Even as a white person, and this is coming from my perspective, I think that if you want to change, take ownership of who you are, take ownership of all your bias, all your privilege. Even as people of color, we have privilege. We just have to recognize them so that we can be real with everyone.
So you basically were saying change is made in the uncomfortable, not in the comfortable. Like you have to be uncomfortable in it to actually change. Gotcha.
And I like that, though, because it also sounds like you're saying you have to own the truth of who you are, right? Like it's an understanding of who you are. And I think what we see a lot of times is, especially in what I'm gonna say this just outright. I think what we see across the land for a lot of white folks is that they are not willing to question what they thought they knew. They're not willing to question who they thought they were,
or what
right?
they were taught.
Yep.
Because if I question it, means I have to admit I might have been wrong about some of the
Yeah.
things that I've carried with me for years, right? And I think that is the
have to
place
let
where
go
we're
of
trying
it.
to put. You got to question from this moment out. Who have I been? How have I really been to people? And is there a part of me I have not seen? And I think that is the place that
And
white
then
people have to.
And then those questions lead to like, did my parents lie to me? And then it starts to like unraveling all
but
your relationship stuff around you and stuff.
But I would
think it's
challenge
bad.
that, and I would challenge it. It's not just something that the dominant white narrative needs to do. It's something that every narrative needs to do, because often they have to do it first because they're most benefited from this system. But we also have to think about it in ourselves as like, how do we as people of color, why are we not working together? Why are we not working together? What is being taught to us as individuals, as a collective, that prevents us from working together? Like, that prevents us from having those raw conversations. Why is there the anti-blackness in Latinx culture? Why is there this colorism that's been stems from years and years of colonization? Like, we have to even question our own limits.
That's the.
Now, anything else here, Matt? I'm excited for this one because you got Latino X right there. She educated. She knows what she's talking about. Go ahead, girl.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do next? That's the question?
Well,
Or how?
yeah. I think, Anna Yossi, also in your answer, if you could provide us with resources as well that you recommend, or tactics that you use in your training in terms of helping people to think past this moment.
Look, this is an advertisement moment for your own company.
Oh, shame.
Well, now that you mentioned it.
I mean, I know what our household believes we need to do next. I'm going to speak for our household because we already had this conversation. We believe in abolishing the police, and we believe that defund the police is step one to abolishing the police. But I know we're running out of time, so we can't get into that whole conversation. But just if you want to know where we are headed, that is our household. And I realize language like defund the police and language like abolish the police is really terrifying to a lot of people. In the same way that language like Black Lives Matter and language like white supremacy is terrifying to a lot of people. And so it doesn't mean that language needs to change. The same way that Black Lives Matter doesn't need to become All Lives Matter. The language is that language for a reason. It's been that language for generations now. Like Matt himself mentioned, that Angela Davis has been doing this work for 30 some odd years. Folks were doing it before she was doing it. We have so much scholarship and organizing work and really a Black woman's legacy of it that shows us a framework for how to get it done. I think we need to have conversations about that and stop acting as if it's a flippant idea that someone created a week ago in their mom's basement or something. Like, this is real and there's a plan for it. And it's not, the idea isn't shut down all police departments and prisons tomorrow. But I think we need to start having real conversations about what it means. And it's a viable thing. So I'm going to say that in terms of what is one thing that we really want to see people having more conversations about. One of the places you can look to that's actually was just created, but it's a great resource to start seeing, like, what are people talking about? That's really scary, is the Aid to Abolition website. Not the Aid to, what?
Eight can't wait.
Yeah, 8 can't wait. Not 8 can't wait. Aid to Abolition.
Aid
to Abolition. And it'll help you, walk you through an introduction to the abolitionist movement. But Angela Davis is a great resource for learning about this. If you want a faith resource, Dominique Gilliard wrote Rethinking Incarceration, if you want to read it from a Black faith leader. What else do we want to offer? right now that is a good introduction?
Mariam Kabe.
Marian Kabe. Oh yes, prison
Culture.
Prison Culture on Twitter is great to follow. Has been doing this work for a long time. Prison abolition work. Just Mercy, not just the film, but the book. I've only seen the film. He loves the book. I will get to it. Yes. Oh yeah.
8.
8.
Yeah.
Sorry. 8.
I was saying AID, aid to abolition. I was like, oh. Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. 8, the number 8. I'm running through them quickly. But that's like scratching the surface. There's so much out there. And I realize that not everyone is going to get to the same place we landed. I understand that this is a very complex conversation, but I at least want us to give it its due attention and recognize why it's such a complex conversation and that it's worth our attention. It's necessary to give it the time to really see what folks have been saying for decades. Anything you want to add?
Well, Matt, I'm about to come to you. Let me just say this. Hello to Brennan and Arlena and Vanessa and Dora and Tara and
Luck.
And Walter.
Let's give a shout out to all our
Juwan and Terrence and Marie and Pamela. All the folks who have joined us. We really appreciate you being with us. I've seen your comments. I haven't had a chance to read all the comments, but people have definitely been putting some great things down in the comment section. So I thank you guys for having a conversation in the comment section. Matt, my question for you in this, and what Javon framed so great,
pull up, Matt,
is how do you? Because this is an important part. White people have to have the conversation with white people. We as black people, we as people of color can no longer continue to just have this conversation by ourselves because we are frustrated, we are tired, we are over it, we are angry, we are sad, we are hurt, and the list goes on of all the we can use. But as a white person, what are the ways that you would recommend for other white people to begin to have those conversations, or what helps to move us towards the direction we need to go in?
I mean, I think, firstly, and I think this is the hardest thing for white people to do, is be prepared to be wrong and be ready to be checked, because you're going to be checked a lot, and that's good. And if people are checking you, that means they care and they believe in your development. Like, there are some people that I have on Facebook who will post all kinds of shit, post all kinds of stuff, and I will not engage. I've decided they're a lost cause. Like, that may be really harsh, and that may be a horrible thing to say about people, but it is not worth the energy and the investment in engaging in those people with conversations. And it can feel like you're doing work, like you're arguing with your racist uncle about why black people should have the vote. Like, yeah, great. That's a great, intellectual exercise, but it accomplishes nothing. So I think one of the things that we have to do is figure out where we have the relational capital and where people can move. And those are the hard conversations, right? Like, I can yell at people I don't like on Twitter, and it doesn't need to go anywhere, and I feel like I've done great work. If I got to sit down with a close friend who's, like, Republican-leaning, or who works in law enforcement, or who wants to be a prisons corrections officer, or even, like, wants to be a prosecutor, because I'm starting to lump them into that group now. Those are the places where it hurts. Like, that's where the rubber hits the road, is, are we willing to walk into those conversations and not run in all guns blazing and yell out 16 different data points, but, like, asking people those questions about, like, why do you want to do this, and how can we talk about what this looks like, and how can we talk about what this really means? Because I know that there's a lot of white folks, and I include myself in this sometimes. It's real easy to be anti-racist around people of color. Like, it's real easy. Like, you show up, you're like, yeah, great point, well done. I read Just Mercy last week. I went to listen to Michelle Alexander speak. Like, I did all the right things. And then you go hang out with your white friends, and you have a totally different conversation. And I think the challenge is bringing those two conversations together.
Yes.
And I think, Ramon, I really want to amplify that point that you made. People of color are sick to death of these conversations. There is no emotional energy left in your friends of color to have these conversations. If you don't do it, no one's going to do it. And I've had to realize that, and I've had to wade into some uncomfortable conversations with people. And for the most part, they've gone great. Like, for the most part, when I've checked someone and been like, hey, let's talk about this, they've gone like, oh, right, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't think about it that way, or I didn't see that. Or, like, most people, if you approach them nicely, are willing to listen. But it can't be, like, there was a time last week, one of our good friends posted something, and Angelsi just, like, showed me the picture on Facebook, and I could just see from her face this, like, absolute exhaustion of, like, this person needs to we need to have a conversation with this person. it's me that's got to do it. And I think that's where we've got to be doing the work. And I think the other thing, and I recognize that this is a little less clear, but and I won't go into any details, but I'm going to steal one of your stories because I'm a white person and I've been restrained for the last hour.
All right. Go ahead.
But, so there was an organization Anna Gelsi was involved with for a couple of years, and she was really trying to push racial justice work in that organization. And basically, towards the end of that time, the people in leadership of that organization flat out told her, like, we don't want to do this. We don't want to listen to you. We don't care about what you've got to say. Like, we just want to check the racial justice box. Like, they didn't say that, but they're like, you're a troublemaker. Get out. You're causing problems for leadership. The leader of that organization has photos of himself on Instagram leading a prayer for racial reconciliation at a march downtown in DC. There are so many steps between excluding people of color from your organization and leading a prayer for racial reconciliation on Instagram that you need to take before you get there. And I think one of the things that we love to do as white people is we love to assume that we can just pivot. Like, oh, I used to, not listen to people of color, and now I do, and now I'm going to walk down 16th Street with a sign that says Black Lives Matter, and it's all going to be okay. And one of the things that I've seen from Anna Gelsi, from a lot of her friends, is they just dismiss that as performative BS. And that's all they're going to see if we keep showing up to these places as white people who have pissed off people of color for years and years, and suddenly we found a marker pen and a piece of cardboard and wrote Black Lives Matter on it. Like, there are so many relationships that we need to heal in private where no one's going to notice, where it might not even be received, right? Like, I asked Anna Gelsi straight out, like, would an apology from this person have helped you? And she basically said no, but at least I'd believe that you're coming round to the public stance that you're taking.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to repair that relationship with you, but if someone reaches out to me in the future and says, can I work with this person? I'm not going to flat out say no. I'm going to say, be careful.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that we need to realize as white people more than anything, is we've gone through life hurting our friends of color. And if we just turn around and are like, now we're all for the cause, we are not welcome. We've got to apologize. We've got to prove that we're willing to do the hard work, because marching is as easy as heck, particularly right now where you're not at work. Marching is the easiest thing you can do. Do the hard stuff. And it is hard.
Yeah, that's good. Do the hard
I didn't even write that for him.
You didn't steal this one. Technically, she's rubbing off on him, so kind of he stole it. He stole it. What I love about the well is that we're able to have these real conversations, and my brother Chris, he's on here. He says, "Keep it real." What I want people to understand. Did we freeze again? No. What I want people to understand is that when I had the dream and the concept of the well, it was that we wanted to move outside of that place of being stuck in the traditions of church. That I think build up a lot of those places of normalcy that Anna Gelsi, you talked about and framed so well, that you talked about, Javon, right? Like, we tend to think we're not having church if there's not a preacher preaching at you and telling you what God said to them, as opposed to allowing you to talk it through and know that there's a God that lives inside of you, right? And so I think that this is so much of what church is to me, being able to have these type of conversations, being able to build relationships with people and move through seeing the God in them. And so tonight was so amazing. I love the energy that all of you all brought. For those of you all who have watched this, I want you to go and like the Amplify Network. They bring material like this all day long, every week. They do morning prayers every morning. We also want you to go and follow the well pages on all of our places. So Encounter the Well on Instagram and here on Facebook. You can like the page. You can participate. We're going to start doing a lot more in our social media.
And NELC, what's your page for your
Brown Eyed Amazon.
Brown Eyed Amazon.
BrownEyedAmazon.com.
And
it's on Facebook. Yeah. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the website. I know, I'm so bad at it. I know. Brown Eyed Amazon, go to it. I do all the things. Thank you.
We also want people to know that they can partner with us. It takes money and finance to do what we do. You saw Kim, who brought you the poem in the beginning. We believe in the creative arts community, and we believe there's so much voice in the creative arts community. And so you can partner with us by giving, and we will receive that gift that you are offering us, or your investment or your partnership with us financially, both at our website, encounterthewell.org. You can go to the last tab. It's a tab for giving. You can also text. You can text the numbers 84321, and you can put any dollar amount in. So if you want to give $500, text 500 to 84321. If you want to give $100, text 84321. Again, you can give through your phone, or you can give on the website. And Chelsea, is there any way that people might contribute to what you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Brown Eyed Amazon, there's ways that you can partner with me. Because what I do, a lot of times I do it for free for folks that can't afford to do the kind of work that they want to do with their communities. And so folks can partner with me to make that happen. And I really, I appreciate for those that want to do that. I was going to say, it's not to promote me because I suck at that. And so that's making me uncomfortable. So I'm going to move to this other thing. But I did want to say, if you want to get involved locally, Black Youth Project 100 and Black Lives Matter DC and the Festival Center are 3 great ways to find out what's happening locally on like a day-to-day, week-to-week basis if you want to get involved in the Black Lives Matter work happening here in DC. But yeah, you can find out how to partner with me.
If Matt and Chelsea, if you have resources, could you send some of those to me, and I will post them on our Encounter the Well Facebook sites, Instagram sites, and I'll try to see if we can post it maybe even on our website. That would be helpful. I want to give a shout out to both Jackie and Terrence over the Amplify Network. We appreciate you. We love you for allowing us to do what we do. We will be live again next week, you guys. The event is not up yet, but we're going to post the event for next week. Next week, we're going to have a panel of pastors, and we're going to talk about where do we find the voice of Jesus and how do we answer the call in Christianity in dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial tensions and racial oppression. So we've got a great panel of people that will be on next week.
Thank you. You said thank you, Elsie and Matt. Thank you, Louise. We know it's all the time. You just moved into a new place. Louise got blessings on blessings going on. You got engaged, baby, in a new place. Whatever God doing in your life, you need to come do it where He already is. But wait, Louise, you're out of here. You're not getting out of here scot free. You're gonna close us out in prayer. Thank you, Louise.
I figured as much.
If he does that, like this, you guys. Share this on your page. Share this to people who you think could benefit from this conversation. Continue to share so that we reach the masses with this type of conversation. Louise, go ahead and pray us out.
Alrighty. God, we ask you for continued peace in these conversations. Continued peace in the challenges that we're going to face in trying to shift old mentalities and old mindsets. We know that you are the only way that we can change it and the only way we can do it, God. We ask that you reinvigorate our passion around this, or even start the passion for some people. We ask that you unite us as your children, because that's all we are. that we're your children, and we know that your love for us is abundantly for everyone. And we're just grateful for just this honest conversation tonight. And we pray that we can facilitate this throughout the entire world, not just in the United States, not just in this city, but just everywhere, God, so that we can unite as humans and as your your loved ones. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
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 We love you guys. Thank you so much for everything you contributed to the conversation. This has been amazing. I've loved it for everything it was. Y'all get some sleep. You, Louise, keep unpacking and stuff, getting them boxes done. And Yossi, don't let Matt steal nothing else from you unless you give it to him for free.
Oh, all right. Thanks, y'all. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.